The No BS Spiritual Book Club, the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to inspire your own journey of self-discovery. Here's your host, founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club, Sandie Sedgbeer.
And with me today to share the stories behind the books that had the most significant impact on his life is poet, philosopher, author and teacher Mark Nepo, who's been inspiring readers and seekers all over the world with his #1 New York Times bestseller, The Book of Awakening. Mark is the author of over 22 books that have sold over 1 million copies in 20 languages. He's been called one of the finest spiritual guides of our time. He was given a Life Achievement Award by Age Nation in 2015. In 2016, he was named as one of the 100 most spiritually influential living people by Watkins Mind, Body, Spirit, and was chosen as one of Oprah Winfrey's and the OWN Network's Super Soul 100, a group of inspired leaders using their gifts and voices to elevate humanity. His latest book is The Book of Soul, 52 Paths to Living What Matters, which is an absolutely incredible book because it gives you food for thought for months and months and months and many, many walks. Mark Nepo, welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for that kind introduction. I'm happy to be with you.
I actually think I would like to open this interview with you reading your intro as we go, because it is so pertinent to what we're doing.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Sure, I'd be happy to. It's just a couple of paragraphs. And it goes like this. Despite all our efforts to prepare, we can't plan who we will love or who will be our most trustworthy friends. Nor can we plan who will be our transformative teachers. You can't foresee who will have the most influence on your life, nor can you foretell which books will change your life. If blessed, we are drawn below the words to the voices who brought those books into the world. It is their influence that stays with us as the presence of kindred spirits who affirm what it means to be alive. We discover these influences as we go. Certainly we look for such voices, such teachers, even try to seek them out, only to trip and discover that the teacher that is enduring is underfoot. I want to tell the story of my influences, the voices that transformed my mind so my heart could show itself completely. But first, let's unpack the word influence, which comes from the Latin influre, which is a combination of in, meaning into, and flure, meaning to flow. So influence means to flow into. In ancient astrology, influence means, quote, the flowing that affects human destiny, end quote. And it is the presence of unexpected teachers who flow into us that affects our destiny. The way sudden rain irrigates the roots of a willow that was 2 dry days from perishing. In just this way, a profoundly true story or pouring out of spirit across the ages can swell our roots and save us. These are the influences that have saved me over the years. As you walk with me through their stories, I invite you to reflect on the voices, stories, and books that have flowed to save your life.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. What a great preface to this. So I'm going to start by asking you our usual 2 initial questions. And the first one is, what do books mean to you? I think you've pretty much told us that.
Yes, well, books are of course, on the surface, they carry and gather knowledge, but I think even more deeply, they are portals, they are thresholds to, just as photographs are windows to other moments in time, in history. Books are these little plateaus through which they're interstices to other times, other teachers, other learnings, other moments of being alive. It's a place where the conversation keeps happening, and I realized one of my early books was a when I was young was an epic poem that was centered on the vision was that as Michelangelo painted the panels on the Sistine ceiling, the characters came alive and told their stories. And only the reader was aware of both. And as a young man, I was very excited, and I worked really hard, and very quickly I ran out of what little I knew, and of course had to research. And as I began to research, I just fell into such amazing worlds. And I started to realize about history that, history is an eyewitness who tells an ear witness, who eventually tells a pen or pencil witness. And so, that's so amazing. And this also brings up for me, in our modern world, we think that to be a skilled reader means to be a speed reader. And it's quite the opposite for me. I'm actually a very slow reader. I can read fast, but what's the point? When I read something, I slow down so I can enter it. And that's when the book and the page becomes a threshold. There's a wonderful passage in the Talmud where a students of a rabbi, they love him, he's a revered rabbi, and they go back and they want to ask him a question after one day's lesson, and they see him reading, so they don't want to interrupt him, so they don't. And the next day, one of the students goes back and he looks in, and the rabbi is still reading the same page. So now they're concerned, and one of them finally has nerve, and they go up and say, "Rabbi, is everything okay? You're still on the same page, and it's been days." And the rabbi smiles and he says, when I stop over a spot of eternity and beauty, why should I go anywhere else?
Yeah, yeah. It's quite clear from the descriptions of your list that you really, you eat books, you relish them, you savor them. You are, it's like a gourmet feast for you.
Well, they're really food. It is a gourmet feast, but it's also under that one that helps me survive. One of the things that, and this is a good example of why books are so important. When I was a young poet, one of the first poets I read who, across the ages, who was so real to me was Tu Fu of the Tang Dynasty, the Chinese poet. Not tofu, but Tu Fu. And he lived in the 700s. And I first read him in college. And he appeared to me once or twice as a guide when I was going through my cancer journey, and in a dream. But I felt like he was the first person that I had across time felt like I could feel where he lived, and I wished I could have met him and talked to him. That's how transparent the pages went.
Question number 2. What was it like for you having to distill this list down? I mean, you're obviously an avid reader, you've read so much. It must have been challenging.
Well, actually it was, and it's, at first it was challenging, and remember you had kindly asked me about doing this with you a while ago, and it just wasn't, I didn't, I was teaching a lot and traveling, and I really wanted to, but it just didn't open up. And during this time, I have a dear friend, George, who's like a brother to me, and he's a master woodworker, and and this had happened quite. The backstory here quickly is that I teach, among many things, I teach year-long journeys where people come where I live 4 weekends a year, and we go on a journey together. And he wanted, as a friend, he wanted to experience that, and I was touched and said, of course. And So he wanted to pay for the course, and I said, absolutely not. You're like a brother to me. And we had this, argument. No, you pay. No, you. No, no. And a loving argument. And my wife Susan said, well, why don't you invite George to make something for you in exchanging his gift for yours? Oh, and we both were so happy at that idea. And it took over a year, but you can see behind me there's a bookcase, and I'm in my study. And George built that bookcase. And this summer, we hired two young men with masks to bring it over and put it here in my study. And so I began, of course, then what will I put in it? And I started going through, like any reader, right? I have boxes everywhere, books everywhere. They were piled up all around me, and as I went through, I started to stumble on one or two of these books and said, oh my God, those books changed my life. And now there's that one. Oh, and that one. Where is that one? And so finally I went through and got them all, and there were these handful which are on the upper left shelf, which I left them there by themselves as as elders, watching elders, over my desk, over my shoulder. And so actually once I found them, well, my God, then it was easy and flowing to flow into, to write their stories, because each one had a story. Each one had a story, which was very instructive in itself.
Well, I'm really glad that happened. I'm glad that it became easy for you to do this. And there were 13 in all. Normally, we only accept 10. I did publish just 10. We do have 13 in front of us. Depends on how much time we get, whether we get to all 13. But let's just start with number 1, which is Anthem by Ayn Rand.
Yeah, so Anthem by Ayn Rand, I was in ninth grade in McKenna Junior High School in Massapequa Park on Long Island, outside of New York City, which is where I grew up. And Mrs. Forshee, who was my English teacher, she was the first one, I think, who saw something in me, because she saw that either that my eyes were wide and I just had all this curiosity about everything. And we weren't reading that book in class, but she had called me after class one day and said, I thought you might like this story. And I was so touched and excited and went home and read it. And then she invited me to have coffee with her and talk about it. And I didn't have coffee. I was too young to drink coffee, but just a spot of time. And what was remarkable about that book for me, even before I started writing, was first the power of story, because Anthem by Ayn Rand is a small little, it's like like Orwell's 1984. It's a little dystopian parable, if you will. And the whole book, very short book, but the whole book is told in the third person plural, we. We've been subjected to this in the world, and life is hard, and this is where we live, and this is what we're living under. And it goes on and on and on until the very end of the book, when we discover that the narrator is speaking in we because the word I has been banned from the language. And that was the first time I saw how a turn of narrative can change the whole world in the reader and in the story being told. And I'll never forget that stayed with me. The magic, that there are so many ways that magic happens with these leaps that can be planned or not planned. And so that alone, I'll never forget that. And it also just affirmed to me the value of our unique and common experience of life. That the I the pronoun I, the self I, is the only lens we have onto the world. And when that is entered with heart and authenticity and honesty, it connects everyone. When it's not, well, then we have narcissism and self-centeredness and all of the weight of that.
Indeed. Yeah. Indeed. That's quite a thought, isn't it?
Oh.
Yeah. Number 2, Siddhartha, Hermann Hesse,
Oh, now
1922.
that book, which of course, I recommend all of these to everyone. But that book by Hess is also an amazing story where Siddhartha, which is also another name for Buddha, but Siddhartha in this is a character who, in his journeys, happens to meet and intersect with Buddha. So right away, he's telling us that everyone has Buddha nature in them. Everyone has God in them. Everyone has an enlightened place, a wakeful place in us. But it's a story where Siddhartha, he tries on so many ways of life, so many passages to find his true self and his true connection to the universe. And this is a book that was the first time I saw where a writer, because Hess is very poetic, and what I mean by that is the story doesn't go horizontally across the pages. The story it's written simply, but it's deep. In each page is a window, is a doorway into the reality he's creating and offering. And that's a book that I have read, well, I'm 69, and I've probably read it at least 8 times in my life. That at different points, returning to it, it's like looking out of a window at different times of the year or different times of life. You see something different. And so it's been very helpful to me each time. And, one thing that I'll never forget about, 2 things about this book, moments in it. One is that he tries on the world of samsara, and he tries on gambling, and he actually looks almost like an anthropologist. He says, I wonder why people are doing that. Well, let me see, let me experiment. And after he gambles and he sees all of it, then he comes to this conclusion, which is absolutely wonderful. He says, well, I see that the thrill of chance is the substitute for genuine risk. The thrill of chance is the substitute for genuine risk. Very, very helpful. Very helpful. And the second thing is, at the end of the story, he's an old wise man, and he's a ferryman. He with an old friend Vasudeva, 2 old men, they ferry people back and forth across the river. But from the time that he lived in samsara, he had a son with a courtesan. And now she has died, and this boy is a teenager. He's like 13. He's hell on wheels, and he winds up living with Siddhartha. And of course, it doesn't matter that Siddhartha is a counterpart to Buddha, that he's enlightened, that he's this wise old man. It means nothing to this teenager. and Siddhartha feels the weight of it and is depressed by it. And Vasudeva finds him sitting on the edge of the river, and he sits down and he puts his arm around him and he says, my old friend, do you think you went through your entire profound journey to rob your son of his?
Yeah. Such wisdom. And this book comes up again and again in people's lists. It is way up the top of, the favorite if I was to rank them overall. I love that comment. That makes sense for me, the comment about chance being a substitute for risk, because I know some people who are gamblers, and I've always wondered, because they're very similar in that they are extremely controlled in every other area of their lives. And I used to think, well, why is it that just this one area is out of control? But there, you've given me the answer.
Herman Hesse gave us the answer.
Yes, he did. Yes. Number 3, Living Dying by Sid Corman. I had never heard of Sid Corman.
Oh,
You know, one of the things I love about this is it sends me doing research on authors. So that's good. And it was published in 1970. So tell us about this one.
well, Sid Corman and this was a very when I was an undergraduate and just thinking I was a poet and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do or would this be it, and then it was clear to me that I was, and Sid Corman is one of the beat poets who, like Gary Snyder in America, had spent time in Japan, which really influenced his life tremendously. And he was the first poet I ever saw give a reading when I was a freshman in college in upstate New York, Cortland State. And there was this really solid man. He was probably in his 50s, and he sat down in the student union, and I was right up front on the floor with my hands on my knees, mouth open, eyes wide. And he had a pile of about 15 books, all his. And I thought, how is this possible? How is this possible? And he read with such an authentic voice about things as they are, which I heard but didn't quite understand, but felt the substantial beauty of that, which of course it came home to me years later in my 30s when I went through cancer and almost died from a rare form of lymphoma. And ever since then, I have understood and felt the beauty of what is. Heaven is right here, right here. So Sid Corman and his book Living Dying, which is all one word, he writes that out as one continuous word, which is instructive all by itself.
Yeah, indeed. Number 4 is the autobiography of William Carlos Williams, and it was published in 1951. Somebody else I'd never heard of.
Oh, William Carlos Williams is one of the fathers of modern American poetry. Died in the 60s and came of age in the early, he was the triumvirate of modern American poetry in the 19 teens was T.S. Eliot, Ezra Pound, and William Carlos Williams. And they were all quite very different. And William Carlos Williams spoke with a very direct voice. The idiom of speech was his poetic line, and he was the next person that I met as a young man in the pages, who I wished I could have talked to, and was so real and so brave, and he and he didn't. I mean, he had nothing personally against Ezra Pound or T.S. Eliot, but they were very opposite ends in their poetic, because Eliot was very erudite and very scholarly. And when The Wasteland was published, Williams was asked, as someone today might ask, if Tom Hanks did a movie and then they went and asked Brad Pitt, well, what do you think? So literary critics went to William Carlos Williams right away and said, well, what do you think of The Wasteland? And he said, as well done as it is, it sets American poetry back a generation. And what he wrote more about was that because it in his mind, it tangled language over experience rather than parting language to us so we could feel the experience. And Williams was a pediatrician in Rutherford, New Jersey for his whole career, had his typewriter bolted to his desk, and so that he could go and deliver babies and then come back and pick up the poem in the typewriter. And one of the things that I took from his poetry the bravery. He has a poem called The Last Words of My English Grandmother, in which his grandmother, and it's hard to tell, she might have been having dementia, but she's struggling and she can't take care of herself, and she's being taken somewhere. And as she's being taken, she doesn't see it as a kindness. She's railing against him and is saying, you're being cruel, and you do what you want. You're not thinking of me. And what I respected and have always tried to abide by is he didn't rub the edges off of that so that he would look better in the poem. He told the truth of the poem no matter how he was cast in it. And I've never forgotten that,
Yeah. And it takes courage to do that, and it takes authenticity to do that, and it takes humility to do that.
Yes, which by his actions he modeled that's, to me, part of what it means to have a voice and to be a poet.
Yeah. Number 5, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, the autobiography of Carl Jung, published in 1962.
Well, Carl Jung is also such a model for so many reasons. And, two things here about that book that really transformed me. One is, during this time when I was an undergraduate, I knew I was a poet, but I had no idea what it really meant. And I also knew that, I was a mystic, and that I was always listening to the whole of life. And, but also I was very dizzied by it as a young man and wasn't sure what to make of it. And I didn't have a whole lot of people to talk to about it. And when I read Carl Jung, and this line is not in that autobiography, but it bears telling here as very important in my life. He wrote about the artist and the poet, and he said that they are, when authentic, the lightning rod for the unconscious. That when we can be authentic, whether we write it down or not, we then open up a channel to receive and voice the experience of others. And that channel is our authenticity. And when I read that, it helped me ground and have foundation in my life as a poet, as a mystic, as a seeker, that I felt like, oh, that's what's happening. Oh, I see. Finally, someone has given me a way to understand what I'm experiencing. And the thing about his Memory, Dreams, Reflections is, that was recorded by one of his students who was a therapist in her own right. And when she asked him to do it, his autobiography, he said, well, I'm not interested if you just want like a chronology of events. I'm only interested if I can give you an inner rendering of my journey here. And that's why it was called Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And that also, for me, extended my understanding of narrative, that it's not tied to the outer sequence of things, that it's in fact wide open. There are all kinds of ways that stories can be told, and to let the story tell us how it wants to be told.
Indeed, yeah. Number 6, Pablo Neruda. Wow, I mean, I went down a rabbit hole there, checking into this person, and just an incredible story behind it. But tell us why you like his work, and then we'll have a little chat about some of the things in the background of that are so interesting.
Pablo Neruda is one of the great poets of any time, and he's a Chilean poet. He won the Nobel Prize in 71 and died in 73. I first came, I introduced to him because my oldest friend Robert, now I was in graduate school and at SUNY Albany, New York, State University of New York at Albany. And I was in my late 20s, and Robert was, while he was going through graduate school, he was working, and he came home one day after work where he had a colleague who was Spanish, and he came home with this book, Poems of Pablo Neruda. And we went out on a hill, as we often did those days, and we sat down and he began to read me some of Pablo Neruda's poems. And I certainly wasn't writing with the depth or skill of Pablo Neruda at the time, or he's unique anyway, even now. But I heard a voice that I had a kinship to. I felt like he was voicing a tribe that I was a part of. And I was excited, and Robert let me look through the book. And then when we left after a few hours, he went to take it back to his friend. And I said, "I'm sorry, I can't let it out of my sight." I said, "I'll gladly buy another copy, but I can't. I'm sorry." And I have that book is up there behind me, and I began to study Neruda, and I think both how he speaks, how he sees. And one of the things about Neruda that is so powerful is in terms of surrealism. In painting, we know what surrealism is. We look at French. René Magritte is a great example where showing objects that are individually realistic, but like putting an apple that fills an entire room. Making things supra real. Well, the French writers experimented with surrealism, and it was wonderful, and it was interesting, and it was gripping, but it was not attached to the human experience. It was like art for art's sake. Neruda and the other Spanish poets, but especially Neruda, was the first one, in my experience in reading, to take that tool and apply it to the human condition. And its power is unbelievable in how he does that. And so that's where I started to learn from him. And about his character, he seemed to be like a mix of Rilke and Whitman. This amazing mix of and unbelievable inwardness and fidelity to inwardness, and this fidelity to his common brothers and sisters on earth. And after a lifetime of publishing in South America, and one of the reasons he's not had until now was not so well known in the English language. He was published all over the world, but he was a part of the Chilean Communist Party, and therefore, especially during the 50s here in America, English was the last language he was published in. But he was working through a coal mine, walking near a coal mine in Chile, visiting people, and someone came out of the mine covered with soot and coal and everything, and he went up to him and he said, "Pablo, my brother, I've known you a long time." And he said that meant more to him than a Nobel Prize or anything else. And that kind of speaks to who he was.
It does. And you have another story about his book.
Oh, yes.
La Negra. You have to tell us that story.
Yes. Thank you. So as I began to collect Neruda's books, I found a first edition of his book, Isla Negra, which is an island that he lived on just off of the coast of Chile. And I had it, I was teaching now at Albany University in probably my 30s. And I also had my first dog at the time, who was a golden retriever, Saba. And And she was about 4 months old, and I, left her home for the first time, went out to dinner with friends, and I came home, and she had, anxiety, which I didn't know. I came home, and the house, it looked like there was confetti everywhere. And she had gone to the side of my bed and had taken the edition of Isla Negra, and she literally ate the hardcover and the first 38 pages of the book were just torn and shredded everywhere. I was beside myself, and I went to scold her, and of course she just shivered, even more afraid. And I stopped and hugged her and said she doesn't know what she's doing. And then I sat down, just crestfallen. I picked up the book, and what she had eaten through too was the first thing now that you read when you pulled this book up was the last stanza of Neruda's poem Shyness, in which he ends the poem with the image of saying, I was so shy, I was like a hurt dog whining in a well.
Clever dog. Clever dog. Wanted to send a message, eh? Yeah. Amazing. What a story. I was so fascinated to read that Neruda was also a politician, and he was hospitalized with cancer in 1973 at the time of the coup d'etat led by Pinochet. And apparently he returned home after a few days when he suspected a doctor of injecting him with an unknown substance for the purpose of murdering him on Pinochet's orders. And he did die a few days later, I believe. And many said that he died of heart failure. They actually did all kinds of tests, and the Chilean government issued a statement saying that, he probably was killed as a result of intervention of third parties. And then there were further forensic tests that rejected that. And then I read there were even further tests that said, no, we do think that, there was some strange bacteria there. So,
Amazing. And, another thing from Neruda's life is, he had a mentor early on in government he became a diplomat for years as a way that his mentor sent him, knowing he was a poet, to different places in the world so he could experience them as a poet. And one of the places was Spain, where he was during the war with Franco and the Spanish Civil War. And he was actually, because he was befriending Lorca and other Spanish poets, and he was actually waiting to meet Lorca when Lorca was kidnapped and eventually killed by Franco and his men. Yeah, quite an amazing person.
I don't know whether you know, but one little fact that popped up, one of my favourite films actually, and I never realised, Il Postino.
Yes.
It featured him as this stranger, that the postman delivered mail to. So that's just a nice little snippet. Wonderful film, Il Postino. So moving on to number 7. Gilgamesh, translated by Herbert Mason in 1970.
Oh, so Gilgamesh is one of the oldest narratives we know in civilization, and it is actually anonymous. I mean, it goes back, the first recorded version of it is in Assyrian times and was in a library by Ashurbanipal, who was a king, Syrian king, who was who created one of the first libraries. Well, that library had clay tablets. You couldn't take things out of that library, and but Gilgamesh was on tablets there. But it was even then it had been told orally for 2,000 years. So this story is like 7,000 years old. And Herbert Mason, who was a professor of religions at Boston University and a remarkable remarkable translator. This was a great example to me. I read his translation of this, and he had lost his father when he was young. So his intimate experience of grief over time, and grief is at the heart of this story, enabled him to translate this and bring it so to life that it was evidence to me and a model of how, if we are authentic enough in our own experience, we become the tuning fork for all experience throughout history. The details are different, but at that core, when the tuning fork hits, we all resonate with the same notes of what it is to be alive. And so that this story, through his own experience, the lens of his own experience, that was the skill beyond the manipulation of language that made this ancient story come alive. And one of the great things about this story is that Gilgamesh is an enervated, self-centered king. Amazing. It kind of echoes today here in America, but he was an enervated, self-centered king, just looking for a meaning, looking for anything to, and not even meaning, just to stir him. And so he has one friend in the world who is a very, this is Enkidu, who has been actually raised by animals. And so they're an unlikely pair. And Gilgamesh decides one day, because he's bored and nothing touches him, that he's going to go to war against nature, the nature god Humbaba. So he brings thousands of people, including his only friend, and they go to war, and of course they can't kill nature. And during this, his one friend is killed. And so the whole journey is that Gilgamesh says, well, I want him back. I'm the king. Who's the greater king than me? Who's God? Which in the Assyrian culture was Utnapishtim. So he goes on a journey to demand that his friend Enkidu be brought back to life. And one of the two things about this story that were so changed and I read it during my cancer journey, that so transformed me, was one is that when he goes to war with nature, the line is he goes to war rather than face the undiscovered country in himself. And of course, I had to say, what is it that I am struggling with in my cancer, rather than facing the undiscovered country in myself?
Yeah.
And the second thing is that the human frailty, we've been doing this for thousands of years. So as he searches out Utnapishtim, he's on a journey like an Odyssey, just like Odysseus on an Odyssey. And he, right early on, he's told by a seeker and a healer, he says, oh, okay, yeah, if you're going to come across these stones, and they're important when you come across them, because when you get, the ferryman will take you to the land of the immortal to make your request of Utnapishtim. So be on the look for the stones. So 3 times in this several-year journey, Gilgamesh, he comes across the stones, and each time he smashes them. Once out of anger, once out of sadness, and once out of arrogance. And of course, he gets to the ferryman, who says, oh yeah, you're the guy. Where are the stones? And he goes, the stones? Oh no, the stones. And this is something we as human beings have done forever. Forever. What keys to finding heaven on earth do we reject or break or smash along the way.
And you wrote an essay about that, and you actually sent it to Professor Mason.
I did. So, at the time I was so touched by this, I said, I've got to reach out to this person. I didn't know where he was. And through his publisher, Parabola in New York, I found out that he was at Boston University. And I wrote this essay, and I actually was teaching at Albany University. And I just went in excited, and I said, forget what books we said we were going to read. Put those aside. We're going to read this now. And just started with the story of Gilgamesh. And I just wrote to him and thanked him and sent this essay about it. And he kindly wrote back. And did I know that he was a regular contributor to an international journal that is still based in London, Sufi, the journal Sufi. And he recommended that they publish me. So he never told me that. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, and this is before email, I get a letter from the editor from London, which, oh my God, went back then, and inviting me to write something for the journal. And we have been publishing together, oh my God, it's been over 30 years.
Amazing. You gave him the gift of appreciation, and he gave you a great gift.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Okay, number 8 is The Madman, His Parables and Poems by Khalil Gibran, or Khalil Gibran, depending on how you pronounce it, and many people pronounce it different ways. What a poet.
Well, this was, of course, we know that his famous work, The Prophet, which is well-deserved, is an amazing book. And this is a lesser-known book of his called, The Madman and His Parables. And I felt that this really helped me because he talks about madness, not in the sense that he's gone mad, but that he suggests that when I speak my truth, others who don't want to listen write me off too quickly and call me mad. In the same way that, William Blake wrote in the Proverbs of Heaven and Hell, he actually was doing that, where he would say that the Christians of the time would judge him too quickly and call all of his ideas about vitality and energy and spirit were the work of the devil. And so Blake said, well, okay, if you're going to call me the devil, fine. Here are the Proverbs of Hell. And in that same spirit, Gibran wrote these are the parables of the madman. You think I'm mad? It brings what it was an affirmation for me, and a model was of speaking your truth even when you're misunderstood.
Yeah.
Speaking your truth. There's a piece of graffiti I once saw at a gas station in Georgia that said, "Those who don't hear the music think the dancer's mad."
Very true, very true. And I loved what you wrote when you said that in the prologue, the poet tells us that he became a madman when thieves stole all his masks.
Yes, thank you for reading that. Yes, that was key to that. And it's interesting now that, in the time when outwardly we need masks, but inwardly we're being asked to take our masks off so we can be there for each other.
Yes. And having to wear the masks is a wonderful metaphor for those that don't want us to take our masks off. There's a whole faction that wants to keep us masked.
Absolutely.
Number 9, Rodin by Rilke.
Oh, this is an amazing book. You can still get it. It's a little hard to get. So Rodin, as we know, was this amazing sculptor, probably, the next in the generation after Michelangelo, of this just incredible understanding, using the human body to reveal unseeable forces of life. And Rodin was well known and established, a generation older than Rilke. And Rilke, in his late 20s, just admired Rodin immensely. And Rilke went and asked if he could be a secretary for Rodin for a while, so he could write about his process. What can I do? I'll do anything to help you. Can I just be here to learn, to write, And Rodin said, all right, he's a little strange, but I'll let him in. And so Rilke wrote this amazing. Here you have one of the great poets sculpting his inner portrait of one of the great sculptors of all time. Just two amazing visionaries. And so this amazingly, I mean, it's just one long poem that Rilke writes about Rodin, and it's one of the best things I've ever encountered about the nature of art. And it's where I think I started to understand in my own takeaway is that art in all its forms is meant to marry what is with what can be. If all we do is look at what can be, then we become romantic and transcendent and idealistic, and we're not barely tethered to the earth. But if all we do is bear witness to what is, then we get buried in the weightiness of existence. Yes. And art is intended to look both ways and marry those. And a great story about this is from Rodin's early life, and he didn't have enough money to have a real studio, so he wound up renting a horse barn, had no heat. And would be there in the winter, and he couldn't afford to hire models. So there was an old caretaker on the land who had a rough time. He had a broken nose that had been broken at one point in his life. He isn't what you would call handsome or well kept. And so for food, he agreed to be Rodin's model. And Rodin did a bust. This is the famous figure, he just called it Man with a Broken Nose. But you have to realize at the time, the entire art world in France was idealizing beauty. And so Rodin, he was going to give this bust to put in a show in Paris, but because there was no heat in his studio, it cracked during the winter. So the back half of the head just fell off. And it was then that he said he realized that nothing was ugly, that beauty was in the truth of whatever is before you. And so he didn't even fix the bust, the broken bust. He submitted that to the show, which was, of course, rejected and criticized and railed against. But he knew from that day forward that beauty was in his adherence to truth.
I just want to say something that you wrote in your description that we published. You said, "I have taken comfort in these lines from Rilke toward the end of his stay with Rodin. I was walking lost in thought through that vast workshop, and I saw that everything was in the process of becoming, and that nothing was in a hurry." I love that.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. Yes, nothing was in a hurry. And of course, that's one of the great painful lessons, but lessons of our time right now. We have been forced, because of this pandemic, to stop.
Yeah.
We've been forced to stop. Nothing is in a hurry. Everything is becoming.
Yeah. Yeah, we just need to allow it. So number 10, A Poet's Journal. And I don't know if you want to pronounce this the Greek way or the English way. I've heard it both ways. I would say George Safaris.
Yeah, that's what I would say, George Safaris.
Yeah.
Well,
so that was 1974.
Yes, now George Seferis was an amazing poet who won the Nobel Prize in '63 over Robert Frost. Um, and there is some kind of justice in that, uh, in my view, in that Seferis, as not as a poet, but as a person, was a more wholehearted person than Robert Frost appears to have been. But anyway, this is a journal for these 6 years, 45 to 50, 51, I believe, that he kept, and it is the most amazing, intimate journey alongside the feelings, thoughts, questions, probings of this remarkable poet. And one of the things, two things from there, one is this, his dedication to the simplicity of language, which goes back, I found that in so many of these books that have changed my life. William Carlos Williams, even Neruda roots himself in that simplicity and then shows its meaning with these depth of these surreal images, but it's always grounded in the, and we just talked about Rodin and Rilke, and so he wrote that we need to speak simply, because the gold weight of our words, the gold work of our words is sinking our ship. And the soul, it's time for the soul to set sail. So let us speak simply and truly. And another thing that he gave a great gift to me, which is also very relevant right now, is in this journal, he also shares the things he finds. And he found this little exchange between two Japanese poets from the 1600s. He found the Basho, who was the great Japanese poet who was really the father of haiku. And Basho literally means banana hut. He was just this very simple guy who was known as a master poet, but he lived by the shore under a banana tree. So when young poets would say, I'm looking for that guy, that teacher. Oh, you mean the banana hut guy? Oh yeah, go down here, turn left. So he was known as Basho, but one of his students who became a great poet on his own right was Kikaku. Great name, Kikaku. And there's this little exchange that Seferis records in his journal that he learned, where he says, that Kikaku brought his haiku to his teacher, and Basho said, you must reverse your haiku. We mustn't brutalize God's creatures, not dragonfly remove its wings, pepper tree, but pepper tree add wings, dragonfly. The whole world depends on how this thought unfolds. And that has become a guiding insight for me. And I think it's very relevant right now. Things will naturally erode, fall apart, come together, but we don't need to add to that. Wherever possible, we need to bring things together. And what it also was a demonstration of the role of a teacher. He didn't teach him how to use language. He taught him how to see. He taught him how to see, no, reverse your haiku. Reverse your haiku. Add, not take away.
So that's the 10. There were 3 more. Palm of the Hand Stories by Yasunari Kawabata, although I think it's pronounced the other way around. There was also Dark Wood to White Rose by Helen Luke, and The Earth is the Lord's by Abraham Heschel. You can say a little about each.
I'd love to.
Say a lot about one.
Well, let me just say, this is like cracking they're each worth much more, but let me crack the door for each. So the first one by Kawabata, these are actually little 1 to 2 page little novels that he told in just a page or two, and that was his calisthenic. That was his exercise as a novelist. He never intended for them to be published. Thank God they were after his death. They're remarkable. They're absolutely remarkable, and they really show how you can enter into a story anywhere and bring people right there. You don't need a lot of setup. You can just drop into the reality and leave just as quickly. And the thing that I learned so much about storytelling from Kawabata was how much a detail can point to a whole life. And actually, he has a story in there. Well, actually, I won't do that. This will get the point across more. And I'm going to skip to someone else, but it's the same theme. In art, John Singer Sargent has a painting called Venetian Interior. This canvas is a painting of a woman seated in a chair in a room in Venice, and the whole room is dark. And she looks very sad, has her hand on her knee. The only light is coming from the upper left corner, which is a window. And that window is casting such brilliant sunlight. The only place it lands is on a ring on her finger. So the only lighted places are her ring and the window. And that detail insists that the subject of the painting is the light outside the room. That and how Kawabata does it, and how Shakespeare does it, and how others do that, that became for me, that's what all of my work, my poems, what I aspire is to have what's on the page point to the world that's beyond the covers. Mm. So that's just a crack into Kawabata. Helen Luke was a mentor of mine the last 2 years of her life. She lived to be 90, and this was in the 90s. And again, an unexpected mentor. And she was one of the first generation of Jungian analysts. And this book, Dark Wood to White Rose, is one of the most phenomenal books I've ever read. It is really all about she takes Dante's Divine Comedy and unfolds it as a parable of our awakening of consciousness. I did not, when I was studying with Helen, she actually asked me, not out of her ego, but because what I was going through brought up issues that her book addressed. And she said, "Have you read Dark Wood to Rose?" And I went sheepishly, "Oh, Helen, gee, no, oh, sorry, not yet." And so I wasn't meant to read it till after she passed away, and because of that, I was able to hear her voice as I read it. And in essence, what she offers is the journey from hell to purgatory to paradise is not some journey up a mountain. It's a horizontal journey of wakefulness, and she suggests that hell is the cost of false living, and purgatory is the struggle to be real, and paradise is the struggle to stay real. Notice we never get out of struggle, which is why we have to love the journey. So I'll stop there. That cracks the door there. And the last one, The Earth is the Lord's by Heschel, and really almost anything by Heschel. But Heschel wrote this book as a tribute to preserve the Eastern European Jewish mind, which he knew was being decimated by the Holocaust and the Nazi regime. And so to preserve that, he wrote that. And this was introduced to me. I have a mentor and friend who died at the age of 102, about 5 years ago, Joel Elkes, who was a child of the Holocaust, a remarkable man. And he just one day, like my English teacher when I was in 8th grade, he just said, I think you need to read this book. Nothing else. So as I read this book about the Jewish tradition of inquiry and of dialogue and of resilience and of questioning, in my life, I am a student of all paths, which comes out of my cancer journey, but I am also I have gone my own way to discover how my mind works and the way that I see things. And I read this book and I realized, after going my way for 50 years, this is how my mind works. That by going my way to find my own way, I wound up in my own tribe. Just remarkable and affirming.
Yes.
Because by being who you are authentically on your own journey, that becomes so substantial that you can find where you belong.
And you ended your description of that book by saying, but after reading The Earth is the Lord's, I realized that through my own authentic wandering, I found my way home. And what better way to find that you belong than by uncovering your own way? Leaving the tribe, I wandered over decades to assume my place in the tribe. I think this is archetypal. Perhaps the greatest truth T.S. Eliot ever uncovered was his deep insight in the 4 quartets. Share that with us.
Yes, his deep insight in the 4 quartets when he said, we shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time.
Yeah. Yes, I could say a lot about that, but we don't have the time. What I'm going to do now is a couple of little things that we do with everybody. Of these books, I'll allow you to include all 13. If you were to have to choose one, just one, to give to someone to help them on their spiritual path, their life journey, which one would it be?
I think given that, I would say Siddhartha.
Siddhartha.
Yes.
Yeah. And keywords. I love the keywords. We always ask for keywords, how do you see yourself? How would you describe yourself? What nouns would you use? And you gave us poet, spiritual teacher, author, best-selling author, storyteller, and dog lover. And I want one more that is something that you wouldn't necessarily put in your bio officially, but something that your closest loved ones know about you that gives us an insight into who Mark is.
Well, I'm a fierce friend.
Fierce friend. I love that. I'm going to write that down because that is going on your page. Fierce friend. That is beautiful. Really beautiful. Okay, so at the end, well, no, I'm not going to do that right now. First of all, I'm going to open this up in case anybody has a question. I know we've had lots of comments. Nobody has actually raised a question. I'm going to read the comments because it's nice for you to hear what people are saying about you. Jane says, I love getting the poet's view of main influences. It made me think of the poets I've forgotten in my own list of influences. And then she added, I'm just rereading Gilgamesh for something I'm writing. Incredibly moving, the basis of the Bible and other literary trends and traditions. And Francis said, the manner and style you translate your thoughts to the written word is beyond elegant, Mark. It transports me even beyond the words you write into the flow of the heart. Your humility, wisdom, and deep, heartfelt appreciation for the written word transforms us in ways that may not be immediately obvious, but affects us deeply. May I ask, who was your most profound teacher?
Oh, well, first, thank you. That's so moving. I so appreciate it. My most profound teacher. Well, I have to say, and this is beyond just the human realm. My heart, the heart, my most profound teacher has been the heart. It has led me everywhere and never let me down.
And is that because you judge everything, you gauge everything by the heart, and if you get what is your signal of an affirmative, that you take that as your guidance?
Yeah. So the heart to me is the tuning fork of the sacred. And yes, so the word trust means literally follow your heart.
Mm.
And William Blake, one of his aphorisms was, of course, was straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to genius. And not genius in the sense of exceptional skill or ability, but the word genius originally means attendant spirit. So straight is the road to improvement, but crooked is the road to your attendant spirit. And following your heart brings you there. And so, one of the gifts for me from surviving cancer was that no wisdom on my part. I just woke up rearranged. And part of that rearrangement was that ever since then, my mind serves my heart and not the other way around.
Mm. Yeah, which is how it should be. Mm. So we have something else, another goodie from you. Before we get to that, I know that you've done a very successful online course, something that COVID thrust upon you, but you've found to be, very productive and enjoyable, and you're about to launch another one. So tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you. I have been learning how to do this, and I'm very heartened that just as we're doing here, there's so much that's palpable between us when we gather like this. And so in October, in 3 successive Sundays, October 4, 11, and 18, I'm going to offer a 3-session webinar on More Together Than Alone, the Power and Spirit of Community. And they'll be from 1 to 2:30 each of those Sundays, Eastern Time. And you can find details and register for that at live.marknepo.com. And the registration is open now. And so if you're moved, I hope folks will join us.
And I really want to say again, I encourage everybody to read your latest book. I said this on air when we did the radio interview. I was really taken aback because I don't read books that I'm interviewing about until a week before. Otherwise, I just forget. And when I read yours, I realized I'd made a big mistake because I think the title, what is the title? 52 Paths?
Yes, to living what matters. Yeah.
Yes. And those, I did not realize those 52 paths were these beautiful chapters that every single one of them really made me stop and think. And they're designed to be read one a week. And then you end every chapter with a question to walk with. And then you encourage people to have a discussion with a friend about that. And I suddenly realized, oh my God, I've got a week before I'm speaking to you, and I've got 52 paths to walk and 52 things to ponder, and I'm just not going to get it done in time. But I have ever since been carrying that with me, and I just think it is, anyone who loves a good conversation, anyone who loves philosophy, anyone who loves to just take things apart and examine their beliefs around them and have them shifted would just love that book.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so thank you for prompting all of those. Oh, okay. Something else to think about. I am going to ask you now, we do have a couple of more comments. Oh, Stephanie has just said she's currently reading 52 Paths and it has changed my life incredibly.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And Robin has left a message, but I'm going to save that to the very end. So what I want you to do is give us a gift. At the end of your printed page, you had written a beautiful piece. Nobody's ever done that before, which I call EndNote. I don't know what you would call it, but I would like you to read that because what you read at the beginning and they're the perfect bookends.
Oh, well, thank you. Sure, I'm happy to. And so in this, when I talk about what each voice has taught me, I'm trying to extract the lesson from each of these influences on me. So this is the end note. Yeah. After almost 70 years of seeking and learning, I look back on these authentic teachers who shaped my mind and heart, thankful to have been shaped. I hold what each has shown me not as an answer, but as a vow to inhabit while living a life. In particular, each voice has taught me to affirm the worth of my own being through our direct and common experience of the mystery of life, to practice authenticity so that at the juncture of our realness, we can discover the living universe, to look for peace in the marvel and acceptance of things as they are, to trust that vulnerability and honesty are gateways to deeper forms of truth, to trust that living life to the fullest will make us a conduit for the heart of all human experience, to hold nothing back, to always lean into life no matter what as an inner form of breathing, to be honest enough to render our humanity bare so we can inhabit the prevailing kinship that waits at the core of all stories and all poetry, to outlive the cost of being hidden and endure the cost of being seen so we can live without masks, to find meaningful resonance with others through the struck chord of our being, to have our heart serve our mind and by so doing become a vessel for care and kindness, to stay devoted to the magic inherent in all things, to love the struggle that living always brings, to treat struggle as a teacher, and to be a lifelong servant of questions, always seeking viewpoints beyond our own. I wonder what voice, what story, what book will be our next teacher. What flow will enter us, bringing more of us forward than we thought possible. Isn't this how flowers bloom, always opening a little further until all their colors are revealed? These books and the voices that brought them into the world are old sages turned friends. They sit tattered on my shelf as quiet and reliable oracles. Like stones in the river, they release deep, mysterious songs just by standing firm in the current of life. Perhaps this is their greatest lesson, that just by standing true, we help to shape the world. I would be much less had I not tripped into them.
That's beautiful. Everything you said there is so true. And the thing, if I have to choose one of them, is to hold nothing back, to always lean into life no matter what, as an inner form of breathing. That really speaks to me.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. A joy to be with you.
Oh, this has been beyond a joy, Mark. I can't think of a better way to say thank you to you than to read what Robin said. Thank you so incredibly much for this beautiful discussion. Your work resonates so strongly with Ralph Waldo Emerson's essay on self-reliance and is so inspiring to see that manifesting in 2020 in the best of ways.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Robin. And thank you, Sandie.
Mark Nepo, thank you for joining us today. We're honoured to have you here. And if you want to know more about Mark, you can go to his website, marknepo.com, and you can also go to 3intentions.com. And one more time, Mark, would you just repeat the website to go to for your course?
For the webinar, it's live.marknepo.com.
That's it. Well, that's it from me, and that's it from Mark Nepo. And thank you so much to all of you for being with us today. You can see the edited version of this next week. We're not going to edit out anything that Mark said. We're only going to edit out my mistakes. But it will be ready for sharing next week. So I hope you'll join us then. Thank you.
If today's conversation sparked your curiosity, you'll love our other shows. The Synergy Sessions, where leading-edge thinkers collide in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities. Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysterious consciousness, energy, and the hidden layers of reality, where science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. And the No BS Spiritual Book Club, where leading-edge new thought speakers, teachers, authors, and luminaries who've walked this path before you share the 10 books that had the biggest impact on their life journey. All 3 shows are available on YouTube, Spotify, Substack, and all major podcast platforms. For more information, visit sedgbeer.com. That's SEDGBEER.com.